Good morning, or good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you are in the world. It is a pleasure to welcome you to this panel in the Atlantic Dialogues 2020. Of course, it is not the same thing as being in Marrakesh and enjoying the Moroccan hospitality and also all the beauties that Morocco has to offer to us when we have a chance to participate in the Atlantic Dialogues. We are living during the pandemic of COVID, the COVID pandemic, and we have been affected by it. But at least we have the opportunity to gather as friends from several parts in the world to discuss issues that are extremely important for the international agenda, particularly in a year that has been so complicated. My students from China, they tell me that 2020 is the year that doesn't seem to come to an end. And we're looking forward to a very exciting discussion today. The topic, as you know, is the rise of Asia and all the lessons that we can learn from what Asia has done, and particularly the issue of COVID and how it has affected the region and also the world. To discuss and to debate during today's session, we have an extraordinary panel. Ambassador Neelam, if I got it right. She is the founder and director of Gateway House Indian Council on Global Relations. Of course, all of them have very extensive resumes, and I'm just giving you this line. Otherwise, we'll spend the whole day talking about their exciting life experience. But I think it's important for us. If you want to know more, in the site and the website, I think we'll have all the entire information. We have former Secretary Amre Moussa from Egypt. He was former Secretary General of the Arab League and former Minister of Foreign Affairs of Egypt. We have John Sawers, who is the Executive Chairman of New Bridge Advisory, and he used to be the Chief of Her Majesty's Secret Intelligence Service, MI6. Perhaps later he can talk about the death of Sean Connery and how it has affected the image of MI6, right? Of 007. And we also have Mayakor Sar, who is the senior manager of government and public sector practice in Deloitte. And he's also one of this year's distinguished class of Atlantic Dialogues Emerging Leader, right? Did I get it right, Mayakor?
Well, more like 2015.
2015. Well, but you're still so young. You still look like very.
Thank you. Far too kind.
Very, very exciting to see you as one of our alumni, right? So we wanted to start this panel discussion with the most important question, and I wanted to address that to Ambassador Neelam. How has COVID affected Asia? I think you need to unmute, Ambassador.
Yeah, now that's good. Yeah,
yes,
I would say that COVID has affected Asia in the same way that it has affected other parts of the world. We find that some countries have been able to deal with it very well because they had an earlier experience of such kind of viruses emanating mostly from China itself. So countries near China like Taiwan or like South Korea have done very well. They had the experience in the past and they were able to start addressing it immediately, long before the Chinese shared information with the WHO and the world came to know anything about the seriousness and the gravity of this virus and how quickly it spread everywhere. So, but then there are other countries in Asia which have not done as well. So I think that there are several things that have happened. One is, of course, that in India, we have done both well and badly with COVID. Fortunately, and maybe this is just a stroke of luck, the incidence is not been as serious in terms of how the symptoms manifest themselves. So, of course, we have many cases of the virus, more than 8 million that we know about, and there might be very many more as in other parts of the world. But fortunately, the cases have not been terribly serious. Now, I know that there is skepticism expressed about the statistics and the testing, etc. And some of it may well be justified skepticism, but I can tell you that if there had been people dying like flies, we would know. This is an open and democratic system, unlike China, where we really don't know how many people were affected, how many died, how we do know something of how they managed to control the spread of the virus. We also know that by not closing Wuhan to the rest of the world, but only to other Chinese cities, they enabled it to spread everywhere. So in that sense, it has been mixed. On the other hand, again, some things the government did quite well and others which it did not do well at all. For instance, when the severest lockdown imaginable was imposed on the country, the government actually overlooked the impact on the millions of people who are internal migrant workers. And no arrangements were initially made for them to return to their homes or stay on in their places of work. Within a few weeks, this began to be handled, but after it had caused a lot of pain and misery and unhappiness and some deaths. But thereafter, the system of testing, trying to follow contact procedures, etc., has been better. And fortunately, other than the metropolitan cities where there has been a concentration of cases, it has not spread as much as feared into the countryside, into the second and third and fourth tier towns in India. The importance of India will become more and more felt as more and more vaccinations reach the point of production. Since India has among the largest capabilities to produce millions of vaccinations. And there again, we hope that the country will be able to step up to the task with the speed and efficiency required. Also, this will require, and I think the government is working on it right now, on creating the supply chains, the logistics, the cold chains, etc., that will be required, both for making it available to other parts of the world, as well as making it available all over India itself. And I think we have a good precedent to go by in how India has been helpful to almost 100 countries, sending experts, sending some of the medications which were used in the early and experimental parts of addressing the problem. So I think this might well represent, not in the specifics, but in the way lots of countries have tried to deal with the problem, because in the beginning, nobody knew what to do with it, because also the early genome sequences were not shared with WHO, or they were not available to everybody else to try and work on it. So I think in the end, I want to say this, that I think there is some level of admiration at how China has been able to handle the spread of the virus. But on the other hand, there is a number of lingering questions on how it was handled in the beginning, why it was allowed to spread, and the fact that it has come out of China yet again, another virus.
Interesting. Now, John, let me ask you one thing. Europe didn't seem to do so well handling COVID. When you look into certain Asian countries that have done well, what are some lessons that you could say that the Europeans could draw from the way Asians handled it, if there are some that you could mention?
Well, I think it's an important question. And I think the reality is there's been a mixed performance in different countries. Some democratic countries, like your own in Brazil, like America, like Britain, like France, have not done particularly well. Other democratic countries, like Germany or Japan or South Korea or Australia, have handled the virus extremely well. And likewise, some autocratic countries like China, have handled it rather well, and others like Iran and Russia have had a very bad experience with COVID. So I don't think it's about political systems. And frankly, the way in which China, as Neelam says, China has managed the virus very well, but it's done it with a level of suppression of individual freedoms that would not be possible in an open society. I think actually the places to look at which have been most encouraging have been like Korea or Taiwan or Germany and some of the Scandinavian countries, which have had a very sophisticated system of testing people, of tracing the virus, and have had a robust and resilient healthcare system. I think one of America's problems is that they've always focused on the treatment of disease rather than public health generally. And I think the countries which have had a higher priority to public health awareness and, if you like, health security have had better success in handling this virus than others. And there are lots of other aspects of the virus. I think the rather brutal way in which the Chinese used its control of supply chains in the health sector, whether it's for personal protection equipment or ventilators or whatever, I think that has raised some question marks about the reliability of working with China on these issues. Their rather arrogant and aggressive diplomacy around the world has been indicative of the new style of China we have to deal with. We'll come on to the nature of China and its relations with the rest of the world. But I think in some ways, the way in which COVID has been handled in different parts of Asia have revealed, have shown some of the good aspects of Asian societies, especially in the democratic Asian societies, and some of the obstacles and difficulties of it as well.
Okay, fantastic. Now, before I go to Secretary Moussa, let me ask Megor, how has it affected Africa? And have you noticed that, have you seen things that in Asia that could be applied in Africa? How has COVID affected Africa, and how can you make a comparison when you look into other situations?
Well, thank you, Marcus. Well, I believe that Africa did fairly well, considering the predictions were very, very bad back in February or March. I think it was the WHO, the head of the WHO, who claimed there would be millions of deaths in Africa. I mean, I come from a place, Senegal, which has been touted as one of the success stories in terms of dealing with COVID. And I think the main reason for that was, in particular, policy. The country was very quick in establishing restrictions. Movements from region to region were restricted. There was a mini lockdown, curfew, as well as travel restrictions from very early on. So in that sense, I mean, when I say we, I mean Senegal, we did really well, and the rest of Africa as well did the same thing. There was also the health infrastructure, which was in place based on a lot of learnings from what happened with the AIDS epidemic. So we used the same methods of communicating to the people, and also intra-government communication that was really important, as well as the health infrastructure, the regional hospitals, as well as the big ones from big cities were very good at adapting to the crisis and isolating quickly all the people that were sick. Then, I mean, you can also argue that maybe climate, I mean, it's been touted as maybe a reason why Africa did so well, because transmission is much slower in a climate in a tropical climate. So that could be a reason. There might be other reasons. People are also skeptical about why we did so well compared to Europe or to the US, who have much better infrastructure and much more resources, but did not tackle the crisis as well. So we can argue that any of these factors might have played a part, but the reality is COVID did not strike Africa as it was predicted when it first started. I mean, in terms of learning from Asia, I think what we can do in Africa to learn from Asia would be to maybe be better prepared next time, have focusing on better communication between different government agencies, for example, health-related government agencies, focusing on developing maybe education as well, health education. And I think cooperation between Asia, Europe, the US, Latin America, and Africa should maybe focus on that and focus on how we also relieve pressure from public hospital by investing maybe in the private sector. There are many reforms, for example, in Senegal that are afoot when it comes to making sure the private sector has more of a stake in healthcare services. And I think, I think this could be something that that Africa learns from Asia, as well as obviously improving in terms of policies.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Maycor. Now, Secretary Moussa, I ask, one of the first things that the United States, well, one of the things that the United States did after COVID was to get out of the World Health Organization. How do you see, how has COVID affected the multilateral system? Should we still trust the the World Health Organization or not? You just need to unmute. You need to unmute Secretary Moussa. No, still can't hear you.
Okay.
No? Okay, now we can hear you. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. Well, first of all, some of the observations. John mentioned something that's very important. It's not the political system that would lead to efficiency or non-efficiency. Autocrats as well as Democrats have done well or have done bad, but it is a question of good management. And the good management means that there should be no denial. There should be no shyness, to say that we don't have enough beds, we don't have enough. No, the COVID has in fact behooved many of us, autocrats as well as Democrats, to say the truth, to say we need help, we need cooperation, we need this and that. And in fact, the world as such showed a lot of good feelings towards each other, Asia or Africa or any other continent. Yes, indeed, there is a certain reality that many countries, especially in the third world, in Africa, in the Arab world, and in Asia, have done well, better than the rich countries, assumed to be well prepared. Because, in fact, as our experience in Egypt, there was no denial. We said the truth. The government, in fact, performed well and tried to open centers, health centers, and asked all doctors and those working in the health sector to move around and quickly and try to make as many tests as you can and prepare the public opinion. This kind of non-denial was very important. And the mobilization of all sources we have also was very important. Of course, the repercussions of the COVID, economic repercussions, tourism stopped, a lot of movement within the country, the schools, etc. There are so many things of that kind. But we, I must recognize that there is something in our country, and I believe also in Morocco, in Brazil, in India, etc. This feeling of the public, the countryside, that this is something of God. If our age comes to an end at a certain moment, it will come. We are going to die. So it is not, we are not connected to the COVID in order to die. So there is something fatal about it. We had in Egypt to mount a campaign to make people aware, especially those people in the countryside, the falahin, the poor, etc., that no, you don't have to die. Just go to this center, try to have a test, and the mask is not something that why should you hate a mask? Wear a mask, try, don't send your children to school, etc. But the feeling, the cultural divide played a role in determining how the society deals with the COVID, despite the efforts of the government and the management, the mobilization, and so on. The other thing, the other issue which you have raised in your question, the multilateral system, in fact, failed. The specialized agencies were the best part of the international system. They were working. The FAO, the ILO, the WHO, etc. They were serving countries, societies, etc. But there was something lacking. So those who criticized the work of the WHO have some right. But we were in the midst of a battle. We shouldn't have addressed, but we shouldn't have been very violent in our criticism to the WHO. The WHO did what they can, but they were not. The decision seems to have not been very ready to deal with a pandemic of that size, of that dimension. So now we learned the lesson, and this organization, the WHO in particular, but all other specialized agencies should do everything to be able to deal with pandemics of that dimension. But it's not only the specialized agencies that fail. The Security Council, you will recall that the Secretary General of the UN said something at the beginning, that now we have to reconsider the definition of threats to international peace and security. It's not a question of the traditional threats, but we have more new threats, including the pandemics, including the climate change. That's what the Secretary General has said. But the Security Council has not moved in this direction. It was a chance for the Security Council, an occasion for the Council to meet and lead the work and call on all countries to mobilize, to cooperate, etc., to take the lead. The Security Council did not do that, except very late. Also the General Assembly. So there was a kind of failure of the system, dealing with a serious threat to not only the security, but the survival, not only the security of countries, but the well-being of people. This is something that within the realm of responsibility of the multilateral system that has not yet really been addressed properly. Of course, we can talk about how the superpower of the world also dealt with this. No, there was a failure here because all countries looked to the United States to lead them. What are we going to do? Where is the vaccine? Where is the etc.? So there was a failure of the system itself and the leadership of the system. Can we and shouldn't we think of certain changes, reconsideration of how the system is managed? I believe so. And I believe that we have to address this issue. How and why did we fail? in facing the pandemic and in mobilizing and in talking to the people and in quiet, calming down the feeling, the negative feeling that they have. That's one. The reconsideration of the renovation of the international system as a result of this experience. The idea was there, but now it has become very important and of an emergency kind of nature. The other thing is, which is my last point, that I believe in Africa, in Asia, in Latin America, and in many areas in the world, we'll have to consider building a health system, regional health systems. So there must be, in my opinion, a African health organization, Asian health organization, European health organization, Latin American health organization. In addition, not instead of, but to be coordinated by the WHO, the World Health Organization. There will be stations, there will be specialized people, specialized centers that are ready to be mobilized, but through an organization for Africa, an organization for Asia, Asian Health Organization, African Health Organization, and so on. This is a point that I believe the time has come to give it a serious consideration. The WHO itself, as we have seen, dealing with a pandemic and attacking the four corners of the world, if this happens again, there will be other failure. We have to think of something new. The international system will have to be renovated. Definition of threats to international peace and security will have to include the pandemics and the climate change and whatever other else that we might see. And also, we have to consider the possibility of building the health edifices on regional level. But again, this is not instead of the WHO, but to work closely with the WHO, which will give the world, the population, especially the poor people, a way to calm down and to see that, yes, we have an African organization in addition to the world organization. So we have references, we have bodies to mobilize, and we have chances to succeed.
Fantastic. Now, let me do just a quick round before I move to the next stage, right? In our discussion, we go deeply into Asia, China, US relations, and all that, and the rise of Asia. But I wanted to ask you one thing, just one quick question. If the WHO, the World Health Organization, were your student, by the actions that they took, would you say that they pass or fail? What grade would you give them, Ambassador Neelam?
Are you asking me?
Pass or fail? No, I'm asking, I'm going to do a round. Let me start with the Ambassador Neelam to see what she says.
I think we'd have to say that it failed because it was not able to coordinate with other bodies in the UN system, such as the UN Security Council, where China did not permit a discussion of the issue, unlike in the case of the Ebola pandemic, which was declared a security threat, which the UN Security Council and the United Nations system took very seriously. So I think we have to look at not the WHO in isolation. I think you can say it passed, failed. It's in a way irrelevant because it depends on the membership and the way the UN Security Council functions. If those countries had taken it seriously, I think the WHO might have been more effective.
So right now you say it's failed.
Yeah, I would say it failed because look at the state of the world.
Okay.
Look at the consequences.
Okay, fantastic. Now, Mayakor, what grade would you do? What grade would you give the WHO? Pass or fail?
Well, I'm not sure I'm qualified to give them a grade, but I'll do
Oh,
is
you can always ask Donald Trump for it.
exactly.
You can always ask Donald Trump about it.
Yeah, sure. exactly. But I think on a more serious note, I think WHO, I mean, in a lot of countries have done badly, a lot of countries have done well. In Africa, as I said before, a lot of countries have done really well. And I think WHO needs probably to do a bit more to support these countries in building more robust health infrastructure and help them as well learn from not only this crisis, but the Ebola crisis from 2015. A lot of countries have learned, Senegal being one, for example, but a lot of countries did not necessarily learn from it. And I think WHO can do more in helping these countries, A, build a more robust infrastructure, and B, improve policy making so that most African countries are better prepared next time a pandemic of global proportions come onto the continent.
Now, Secretary Moussa, pass or fail? Thank you, Maycor.
Well, for the same reasons mentioned or stressed by my colleague from India, that until now, this is almost a year since the initiation of this, the word initiation is wrong, since the beginning of this pandemic. And as you see, we are still grappling with the effects and haven't reached a clear station yet. So I would give WHO 5.5 to 6 out of 10.
Okay, all right. No, and John, what's your perspective?
I agree with Neelam that the initial response of the WHO was really not very good. They should have raised the alarm earlier. I don't think China helped the WHO. I think they rather bullied the Director General of the WHO, and the independence of the WHO was not upheld by the current leadership. So initially, in the first months of the crisis, the WHO failed. Where I think it succeeded is that it has, and Mayakor has talked about the relative success in Africa in containing the virus. I think WHO has been very effective in supporting African governments. Now, there may be a variety of reasons, but I think the WHO's great strength is in the developing world rather than in the developed world, where it can help with the expertise and advice to deal with these sorts of dealings. Just because the WHO failed initially, I think President Trump made a big mistake in withdrawing from the WHO. The answer is not to pull back and reduce funding, it's to invest more. I think the most important thing that's happening in the WHO at the moment is Helen Clark, the former Prime Minister of New Zealand and former head of the UN Development Programme, is leading a reform effort inside the WHO so that they are much better geared up for dealing with the next virus, and there will be a future virus like this, than it has been to deal with this one.
So your grade?
Well, as I say, initially 3 out of 10. I think in parts of the world, and in terms of its longer term response, 7 out of 10.
Okay, all right, good. Thank you very much. Now, let's move on into our discussion on the rise of China, right? Now, and I wanted to start with you, John. A new president has been elected in the United States, according to what we see, and I think it's unlikely to change. So what do you think will be the relationship between China and the United States under Joe Biden? And how will that relationship affect the future of Asia?
I think when we look at the US-China relationship, a lot of attention is paid on the sort of rather erratic qualities of President Trump and the confrontational style that he has. And not enough attention is paid on what's actually changed in China itself. I think the changes in China have been very fundamental. China, under the guidance of Deng Xiaoping and his successors, was moving in a direction of gradually opening up the country, gradually cooperating and building up its relationships with the rest of the world. Xi Jinping has taken China in a much more assertive and autocratic direction. There's been the centralizing role of the Communist Party has been the building up of a new cult of personality around Xi Jinping. And the way in which China deals with the rest of the world is one where there is no reciprocity in trade and economic matters, and there's a lot of aggression. And Neelam will be able to talk about the aggressive Chinese approach towards India of the last 6 or 8 months. So I think what President Trump was doing was reacting to some really very serious changes in China. And I think Joe Biden, when he becomes president, there'll be a degree of continuity here. The style will be much smoother. The method of engaging with China will be more predictable, and there'll be more of an emphasis on working with allies, Japan, Korea, India, Australia in the Asia Pacific region, and with the transatlantic partners. But China is moving in a direction which is frankly not very helpful. It's crushing dissent inside its own country with the suppression of the Uyghur and the Muslim community in Western China. We're just seeing just in the last few days how China has reneged on its commitments on Hong Kong. And has gone back on the one country, two systems agreement that was reached with the Chinese back in 1997. That was supposed to last 50 years. It's barely lasted more than 20 years. I think we're moving into a world where there are two great powers, United States and China. It's not really an Asian century. There will be relative parity in terms of economic and military strength, and Asia itself is not one entity. India is completely different from China, and the Asian democracies of India and Japan and Korea and Southeast Asia and so on are very, very different from the autocratic countries in Asia like China and Iran. So I think we're going to see a relationship where Europe has opened its eyes really to some of the challenges of China in terms of Chinese seeking control of some of the most important industrial technologies, China playing an important and powerful role in acquiring businesses in the West, and we're taking measures in the West to prevent aggressive Chinese acquisitions here. So I think there are going to be areas of confrontation, including on human rights and security matters. There'll be areas of competition, like in technology and business, and there'll be areas of cooperation. I think one of the big changes from President Biden will be his priority on climate change. And climate change is something where America, Europe, China, India all have to work closely together if we're going to avert the catastrophic climate change that might be heading our way. So we have it is the biggest single challenge we face, how we manage the rise of China. And it's become particularly difficult now that China not only has an economy roughly the same size as Europe's or America's, but has a much more autocratic style of leadership, which is suppressing dissent inside China and making it more difficult to work with China.
Let me ask one more thing here, just a follow-up question here, John. Now, when we say we want to, how we manage China, are we approaching it with a Cold War perspective, or a containment kind of idea, or is it a little condescending when we say we want to manage China?
No, I'm not sure I said we manage China. I think the big difference between President Biden's administration and President Trump's administration is there'll be much more cooperation and consultation with alliances in terms of the wider policy towards China. And it's not, Cold War is completely the wrong mentality. It's not a containment of China. China's economic growth has been a huge boost to global growth, and not least in places like Africa, where their demand for raw materials has been a huge boost to the African economies. But as I say, I think we need to be clear. There'll be areas of cooperation, like on climate and on global health. There'll be areas of competition, like on technology and the economy. but there will be areas of rivalry and if possibly confrontation, where China tries to impact on the rest of the world's interests in an aggressive way. And what we saw with India earlier this year is an example of that.
Now, Ambassador Neelam, you're the neighbor, right? You're the closest out of all the people who are here. You're the one that lives closest to China, right? So should China be contained, refrained? How do you handle that?
So I think that, we don't have to fall into semantics, but there is a distinct pushback against China, which has become militarily aggressive, which is expansionist territorially. It's looking to take territory, not just from India. So you look at the whole South China Sea saga, you look at its threats to Taiwan, you look at Japan, if you like. So I think we have to recognize a couple of things. That China has a territorial appetite. Earlier, China used to speak also about an Asian century, which you mentioned yourself. Now it does not. It talks about the Chinese dream. So as John pointed out, there is a distinct difference in the way China comports itself with the rest of the world in the last, especially since the second term of Xi Jinping. So I think for the world must internalize the big changes that have taken place in the global system. There is the rise of China. There is the nationalism of America, which caused it to withdraw. There is the global economic shift, which has moved the action, if you like, to Asia. And certainly we in India feel the weight of the rise of China because it has become so aggressive. Till 5-7 years ago, there was a lot of discussion, including in India, about the benefits of Chinese growth, about the benefit of trade with China, of of countries working together. But in the last few years, the whole debate has shifted to how ASEAN countries, for instance, do not want to be forced to choose. Even Australia had a big debate on how its economic prosperity is linked to China, but its security is dependent on and linked to the United States and to its Western allies. That debate is over. Lots of countries, it is still a fact that they have economic interlinkages with China, which are deep, which are wide, but they have, I think, recognized that the security threats that it poses are now so great that a process of deglobalization, of relocalization of industry, Japan has put up $2 billion to encourage its companies to move out of China and either return home or relocalize in Southeast Asia or in India. The United States has a program for relocalization. Now, is it all going to happen in 2020? No, but the process has begun and it will gain momentum once several countries, several corporations move beyond a China plus one strategy, which is what they had been following for the last few years. I think that the world will quite soon have to recognize the gravity of what's happening inside Xinjiang. There are now enough reports, enough research to really be speaking about camps. These are like prisoner of war camps where over 1 million of the residents of Xinjiang and some Kazakhs have been restrained. They have been, I think the Chinese formulation of this was to change the mindset so that the remaining pockets of poverty could be reduced. But now they're talking about Islam with Chinese characteristics. That's what the General Secretary himself said. I mean, we are beyond capitalism with Chinese characteristics. If you can talk about a religion with Chinese characteristics, I think it's an indication of how far it can go. And the fact that China has been so successful in its technological advances has had the unfortunate collateral effect of mass surveillance, of spying like 100%. What you see coming out of Xinjiang, the cameras, the kind of surveillance that is being operated, I mean, this is beyond anything the world has seen anywhere else. And I think the world cannot and will not continue to ignore it. In fact, it has begun to recognize it. It may be that the talk of Hong Kong is louder and is more visible, but I think in the end, something like what's going on in Xinjiang, if the world absorbs, then the world is headed in a most unfortunate direction. And I think that the outcomes will not be good for anyone, for other countries as well. Now, of course, in India, we feel it much more because we have a border of more than 3,000 kilometers, which is not demarcated and which China refuses to demarcate. It is one thing to have a border on which we are not agreed. So we have what is called a line of actual control. But every now and again, China, with what are called salami tactics, will swallow some part of territory, will take away one hillside, will take away something or the other. And up to now, as exactly as happened in the South China Sea, the provocation was not enough for anyone to, certainly the United States did not respond militarily. But in India, it reached a point now that there has been a military stalemate. In this particular invasion is the only word that can be used, but we can call it incursion if you like. And right now, we have a proposal from China for both armies to de-escalate, to move back. Now, this is a tactic because first you come in 30 kilometers and then say we'll both move back 15 kilometers, which is to say you're legitimizing your grab of 15 kilometers. And it has happened before. And unfortunately, Indian governments did not address it seriously enough. But we have a nationalistic government as well in India. It is not only in the United States or only in China that the governments are nationalistic. And this time the government, because of the absolute outcry in the country, it was forced to take some measures, including economic measures. More than 200 social media sites were banned, starting with TikTok. And all of this has consequences because after the Indian ban, the United States is talking about banning TikTok, and it has been in a confrontation with ByteDance, the company that owns it. But what it did result in is that ByteDance had to postpone or cancel an IPO, which was supposedly going to be worth $30 billion. So economic consequences of this nature, up to now, the Chinese may have ignored, but they cannot continue to ignore. And we see what's happening within China, calling off the Ant IPO 2 weeks before it was scheduled to take place, when billions of dollars had already begun to flow in. And why? Because of a speech that Jack Ma gave. I mean, not all of what I'm saying is necessarily exactly what is happening. But this is the problem. Nobody outside can know exactly what is happening inside China, why its government acts the way it does, why it takes the actions that it takes. And that, considering the size of China, the importance of its economy, you have now a situation where people are talking already about not the cheapest supply chains, but the supply chains that can be trusted. And I think COVID had a lot to do with it. And as John pointed out, the fact of how it tried to manipulate the supply and sale of PPE, of medical related equipment, I think has also left a bad taste in the mouths of many countries, especially as it unleashed its wolf warriors at the same time and was abusive to, in Sweden, in Italy, in Australia. I mean, it's a lot. And certainly in India and in Asia, we feel the weight of the expansionism of China.
Oh, you're the neighbors, right? But there is one, just a little quick comeback though, Ambassador. Is there any country that could actually replace what China does when it comes to, its productivity and its competitiveness level in the world that could replace China immediately or something like that? Are we daydreaming about replacing China soon?
If you want a photograph, maybe, but the world doesn't live in a photograph. We live in a dynamic situation. Many companies, as you know, had already set up production facilities in Vietnam, in Southeast Asia, in Bangladesh, and some have set up production facilities in India. Now, if you are Foxconn, are you going to trust China? How long are you going to trust China? And Taiwan is a big player, as you know, in electronics. They are moving their companies or encouraging their companies to start moving. But that's what I mean. If it's a snapshot, no, almost no country can compare with the scale of China, and it's extremely efficient labor force now. But is that going to be forever? Certainly not. After all, there was a time when nobody compared with America, and now look at the world where we are in. So I think that once a process starts, it then generates a momentum, and that momentum is being propelled by the way China is acting and reacting to anything that anybody says. I mean, telling Australia that it's like bubblegum on the sole of its shoe, I think there should be consequences, and I think there will be consequences.
I see. Fantastic. Now, Secretary Moussa, let me go. You gave the WHO 6th grade, right?
No, less than 6. Between
less
5
than
and 6.
6. Between 5 and 6. Now, now let me ask you one thing. Well,
Yeah.
so the international
If
system.
you need an amendment, it's keep at 5. Yeah.
Okay. Now, the international system that has been built over the last 70 years seems not to be able to address the current challenges. And we have newcomers, right? You have China, for instance, and other Asian countries trying to play a greater role. So what will happen to the international system with this, inflow of these countries seeking to have more say in the global table?
Well, had President Trump was re-elected, I would have expressed a lot of worries today, that because he doesn't believe in the international system, in the multilateral system, and therefore
and the Chinese
changing.
do, huh?
Excuse me.
And the Chinese, they always. I was just wanted to add, but the Chinese say that they believe the international system. They believe.
Yes, I'm talking about the international, how to change the international system. And had President Trump been re-elected, this proposition wouldn't have seen the light. But with President Biden elected, I believe that he will be of the same opinion like many of us, that the system has to be reconsidered, but not to get rid of it, but to strengthen it and make it ready to meet the challenges of the 21st century. This is very important. I heard myself President Xi of China in Davos talking about globalization, and went to tell thousands of listeners that globalization is the mood of the 21st century. And if America, that was under President Trump, if America is not ready to lead the world within that system of globalization, China is ready to do that. That is one. Number two, having heard our colleague from India in her very eloquent intervention, I would say, oh boy, it is serious indeed. And it is not that easy to talk about the rise of China, of Asia, but we'll have to be very frank with each other. When we talk, or when others talk about the rise of Asia, everybody means the rise of China.
Right.
And that is what made what disturbed our colleague, and rightly so, from India. The Asia cannot be considered as the West, one culture. So it is the West's position on this or that. Asia has no regional organization. They don't sit together, all of them, in order to even to manage their conflicts and their differences. Therefore, it is the Asian rise, that the rise, the progress that happens in Asia from this and that country. There are rich countries like Japan, like China, and there is an ascending country and very assertive country like India, and also Australia, if we just consider Australia as part of that space. The China has also its credibility within the third world. So what we hear now is how America would deal with it. Its immediate neighbor, great neighbor, India, would deal with it. But when you go to Africa, the third world in general, you will see so many hopes pinned on China and the progress of China and the trade with China and tourists from China and so many things. So in fact, you are, or we are talking in a certain space that does not really represent the opinion across the board in the world. China, with its the project, the famous One Belt and Road, is building a kind of not only relations or friendship, etc., but partnership with almost 70 countries, including some in the West too. And every country now is going to say, well, how come that this road and Belt and Road doesn't pass by my country, pass by this or by that? China has a different point of view. Yes, indeed, America's point and America's position is so important for China. So is India's position and India's strength, etc. But the third world is there and is one of the main concerns of China, and the reaction in, as I see them in Africa and the Arab world, etc., is still so many countries need the contributions and the help coming from China, the trade coming from China, tourists coming from China, and so on. That is one. That is two. Let me move to the third point that was raised by John about the three areas of confrontation, of coordination, and of cooperation. It depends what do you mean by that, and how much is big the area of confrontation, how much is big the area of cooperation, and also the area of coordination. If the areas of confrontation will include armaments, the big weapons, the high level of science that produces bombs and rockets and so on. Oh my God, this is serious. So the area of confrontation is not 1/3 of the space before us. No, it could be the prevailing, the more the strongest area in relations between the superpower, existing superpower, the United States, and the challenger, which is China. Yes, indeed, we will have to work together, even the third world and other countries, to contain to the best possible way the rise in confrontation between America and China. But as you see, and as I see, I will throw one idea that I have discussed with some think tanks in our area and with some friends in New York and so on. Has the time come for us in the third world and Europe and Russia to think of a new form of non-alignment between America and China, and to intervene and to try to talk about limitation of weapons production, and to make sure that there will be no serious confrontation that would bring both of them. Therefore, we need new ideas. One of those ideas which I wish to mention now is, what about the third world, or the third way? Europe will be, perhaps that is something new, that's non-alignment model 21st century. So non-alignment should include, by definition, several European countries. And the whole of Africa, many Latin American countries, many Asian countries, because all of us are not interested in another confrontation or another Cold War that would really either destroy the world or stop its right development into a better situation.
Fantastic, Secretary Moussa. Now, let me just go back to one thing then. And how do you see, as you were mentioning, right, this new alignment and all that, how do you see China somehow, or, how is China influencing that process? Is Belt and Road Initiative an alternative, or how do the Chinese want to shape the world order as we have it? What is your perception?
Are you asking me?
Yes.
Yeah. All right. The Belt and Road is taken seriously in many parts of the world, including Europe. Belt and Road. It offers a lot, and with it, central banks or world banks of infrastructure, etc. And many countries have already rushed to join the new banking system. That's still not very big thing, but this is the beginning. A new banking system. It is not only the Belt and Road with projects, etc., but no, there is a banking system, financial system, and so on. So China is taken seriously. With no suspicion, it is seriously with suspicions in certain areas, and taken seriously with hope for more cooperation and integration or help or whatever you may call it. China is taken seriously in the third world, and the third world will watch as we watched the Cold War. Are we going to watch another Cold War? This is our responsibility now, to prevent a Cold War from erupting with all the repercussions of it. And I take into consideration here India and China. We should not let them to their relations to deteriorate to the point of another confrontation. I listened carefully. I understand. I appreciate what my Indian colleague has said, but the situation is serious about China. And China is a power to reckon with, and a power that would, and within a few years, say, no, I'm here, I'm China, and I want, and we see that in the Middle East. We see that in their approach to Iran and to the Gulf. And then, of course, this will move, and their movement in Africa itself. It's not a question of building bridges or building roads. It is more than that. And it moves from one continent to another. That is why I believe that the issue of China will have to be discussed from different and wider angles, rather than certain relations between China and its neighbor here, or even from the prism of America, China, China, America only.
Fantastic, and fantastic, Secretary Moussa. Now, let me ask you, Mayhor, one question here. You're in Africa, right? Is your perspective leaning more to what Ambassador Neelam said, or what Secretary Moussa said? What's the perception that you have regarding China?
Well, my perception is...
You're in Senegal, right?
I'm in Senegal, that's correct. My perception is a little bit in the middle. I think going back to the question you asked Ambassador Deo and John before, regarding the reorganization that the world is going through. I think, I mean, for me, it's clear that the relationship between the US and China and Asia in general will not change, because the American diplomatic superstructure has always been good at maintaining, you know, a clear organizing principle through different administrations. And it's clear, I mean, there are a couple of dynamics that will be interesting to watch. The internal dynamics of the United States. I mean, if Joe Biden and the Democrats lose the two Georgia seats, then they will not control the Senate, and they will be, I mean, to enact any meaningful change, even in foreign policy, an American president cannot do it without the Senate. And the other internal dynamic that will be interesting to watch is how Joe Biden, Nancy Pelosi, and the Democrats manage to how do they manage to control the focus, because that will be important in deciding what kind of policies they will lead towards Asia and towards Africa and the rest of the world. At the moment, I think the biggest change we'll see is probably in rhetoric. We'll see a return to the whole talk. I mean, obviously, there will be a move away from Trump's China in, sorry, a bull in a China shop type of approach to diplomacy. But at the same time, in a sense, it will not really change. I mean, the tariffs, there is broad consensus within the different parties in the US regarding tariffs to China. So I think it will most of the tariffs will remain. There will be a continuation of the pivot to Asia that President Obama initiated, and President Donald Trump, despite the rhetoric, continued. And I think there will be a lot more reassurance towards the allies. The question is whether the allies will listen, and whether the Biden-Harris administration will have enough leeway for them to reassure countries like Japan, countries like the Philippines, countries like India about their seriousness into forcing China to abide to international rules. I mean, as I said, in terms of rhetoric, obviously, it will be different. The Uyghurs, Joe Biden was the first during the primaries. He criticized China for their treatment of the Uyghurs. So the human rights issues will come back to the fore, but whether they have the leeway to implement it and enact it is a different matter. Now, having said that, as an African, this dynamic will be important, because not just this dynamic, because the whole pivot to Asia means that countries like Turkey, countries like Iran, countries like Saudi Arabia become more powerful, and these players are starting to become more apparent in Africa these days. I mean, a couple of years ago, it was the Turkey president who forced the Senegalese government to close the Yavuz Selim schools, because they were tied to Fethullah Gulen, who's a cleric, who's opposed to Erdogan. So it created this almost diplomatic incident between Senegal and Turkey. And these are dynamics that we'll have to watch as an African. And to me, the answer will come from African governments and how they are, how do they reform. It's important to create, first of all, if we're going to learn from Asian countries as well, such as Singapore, Hong Kong, and Taiwan, and so on, is that state matters. I mean, for the past 40 years, we've been abiding to this Washington consensus, whereby we had to liberalize, deregulate, and roll back the state. I think state is important, and this crisis has demonstrated it. I think it's important for African governments to have something they don't have today, which is to have a state that's forward planning, a state that's meritocratic, and a state that's pragmatic. This will, I mean, having a forward planning state is important in the sense that you need to organize the state infrastructure so that the right hand knows what the left hand is doing. There's better cooperation between government institutions. The meritocratic aspect of it, it's important. I mean, today, if I take the example of a country like Senegal or Cote d'Ivoire, civil servants are paid the same thing they were paid in the 1970s or 80s. So this creates corrupt practices. This creates disenchantment with work, demotivated staff, and this is important if public administration is to meet the challenge that's coming with, as I said, countries like China, Turkey, and so on, and the United States. And it needs to be pragmatic because it needs to build the trust with its people that it's got its best interest at heart, and it's not just here to take advantage and just an elite enriching itself on the back of the people. It needs to demonstrate that. So these three aspects are really important if public administration is to know what it wants from all these different powers vying for power in the region. Trade policy is also important. Countries need to make sure intra-African trade is also important, because that way they will be able to work on what their competitive advantage is, be protectionist of their competitive advantage, and then open up to countries like China on the aspects of the economy that they want investments in. And the third thing, the regional players need to play their full role in the region. I mean, I'm talking about countries like Nigeria, like Kenya, like South Africa, like Morocco. They need to be better investors and better at safeguarding this this regional integration that will make Africa, ready to meet the challenges that are coming.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Maycor. Now, I have three questions here, and I know we're in the last stretch, and I know that Secretary Moussa needs to leave a little earlier. So let me ask you the questions that we have, and I'm going to address one to each one of you. Question for you, Secretary Moussa. I know you have to leave soon, but I wanted to ask you this. Comes from the audience. Can the coronavirus, be a catalyst for reviving regional organizations such as the African Union and the League of Arab States?
I'm sorry, Marcus,
That's the question.
Again,
can you hear me now?
Okay. Now I hear you, yes, okay.
Okay. Can the coronavirus be a catalyst for reviving regional organizations such as the African Union and the League of Arab States?
Yes,
question I have
indeed.
for you. Now,
yes.
Hold on 1 second. Let me tell the other questions, okay, and then we'll start with you. Now,
okay.
Question for Ambassador Neelam, right? Would the de-escalation of tensions between India and China return if the territories taken go back to their previous status? Right, the de-escalation, what if everything gets settled and everything goes back to the way they were? Would the de-escalation between China and India go down? And one question for you, John, how do you see and how will the post-pandemic affect international relations between states? How is that? What will be the impact that you see coming from coronavirus? So let's start with Secretary Moussa. Your question,
yes,
your
indeed.
answer.
Yes, indeed. I believe it is a very important and, in fact, historic, exceptional catalyst for organizations like the African Union, the Arab League, and all other similar organizations, even for the United Nations. Now, what happened in this year as a result of the COVID, and not only the COVID, but the way several countries, including the big, rich, advanced countries, that rang an important bell, a bell that telling everybody that, you see, try to do something for yourselves, you might not be saved. Now, we have to make sure that the system, the international system, will be revived, will be renovated, will be prepared to meet the challenge of the pandemics and also the change, the climate change. So we have in the African Union to make sure that if this happens again, the continent, the regional organization in the continent will be ready, will be well equipped, will be able to coordinate immediately with the mother organization, which is the WHO, that has to be also in a better shape. And we can coordinate the African Health Organization with the Asian Health Organization or the Mediterranean Health Organization, and so on. Therefore, I firmly believe that the pandemic, the COVID-19, is indeed and should be considered as such, is an element, important element, a catalyst that should behoove us to change on the country level, on the regional level, and on the international level. And I believe that if you asked me about the African Union and the Arab League, I added the UN. If we do not change, if we do not renovate, rehabilitate, talk about a future, the future system or the future of the system, I don't think in Africa or in Asia or in the Mediterranean, etc., we can do it. We need the leadership of the United Nations to consider the pandemic as an important catalyst for the organization to change. And as I told you, even the Secretary General is talking now about a new definition of the threats to international peace and security.
Fantastic, Ambassador. If you need to leave, you're excused to do so.
Thank you.
I know you had to leave a little earlier.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for
you.
your participation.
Enjoyed that tremendously.
We'll see you next time.
Say hi to all my colleagues.
Hopefully in Marrakesh.
Inshallah.
Thank you very much, Ambassador.
Thank you.
Inshallah, we'll see each other soon.
Bye-bye.
Now, Neelam, Ambassador Neelam, that's your question, right? Can things go back to normal if things change?
The answer to that is I don't see how things change. I mean, what would cause things to change to the point where we can say, okay, like 2020, it's a virus in the system, take it out. I don't think so. I think you can see that there's already been some developments which are not necessarily, designed to make you feel tranquil or safe. I mean, the emergence and developments of the Quad, the Quadrilateral Organization, is a serious pushback against China with military elements. So it is the United States, Japan, Australia, and India, which have now raised the meetings, the frequency at foreign ministers level, as well as the level of the exercises between the four navies. Countries like the UK, France, Germany, the European Union, even the ASEAN countries have all issued Indo-Pacific strategy security papers. I think we are not in a situation, I hope we are not in a situation where that train has left the station, but I think we are entering waters which are not very reassuring and tranquil. Comparisons with the Cold War, the previous one, obviously are not very helpful because the Soviet Union was not integrated into the global economic system, and nobody had an economic stake in the survival of the USSR. But for 40 years, many proxy wars were fought in Africa, particularly in Latin America, and some even in Asia. So I don't think it's a good comparison, and I hope we are not going to be there. But the fact is that from everything that has gone so far, it would appear that China is seeking, first of all, dominance in Asia, starting with North and North and East Asia. So you have, the aggressive gestures against Japan, against Taiwan, Hong Kong now. You have the whole South China Sea. I mean, the latest statement that the official spokesperson of the Chinese Foreign Ministry made against Indonesia was that it doesn't matter what Indonesia thinks, but China has traditional rights in the waters around Natuna. This does not look like a country that is seeking resolution. It looks like a country that is creating, being provocative and creating confrontations. So I think we may be past a point where everything can go back to the old days. I think it's very important to take into account what Secretary General Amre Moussa said, and everybody has to think about how to address this. But by now, or at least for these moments, Chinese arrogance and aggression is so excessive that I don't know who are they talking to. They're not going to resolve problems between, say, the United States and China, or between Japan and China, or India and China, by talking to the third world, by talking to African countries. That's not where solutions will be found. I think solutions should be found, and I hope they will, and I hope everybody will be seeking those, including India most of all. We have the most to lose in military confrontations. But as of now, I do not see that anything is developing which can take us there. I think that, and that's partly because the multilateral system, the UN system, is so outdated that you even had a former British Prime Minister say that, the UK is not a global power. It is not ever going to be a global power. If the Security Council is not then reshaped to expand, to include new countries. I think that to continue to exclude Japan because of Chinese sensitivities, I think it makes no sense at all. And I think it's not going to be productive. The Security Council at the beginning of the pandemic kept on wanting to talk about the abrogation of Article 370 in India vis-a-vis Jammu and Kashmir, and not the pandemic, because that is what China insisted on. If the countries in the Security Council cannot resist a situation like that, I think the Security Council has rendered itself irrelevant, not only for Syria or Libya or Yemen, it has rendered itself irrelevant for addressing this, which unfortunately could become a bigger threat. And certainly in India, we see it as our most immediate, proximate security threat.
It sounds.
Now, John, that leads to your question.
Well, it sounds, Marcus, as though I'm going to have the last word, as we only have 3 minutes left. But I would say, first of all, that the one of the effects of this virus, of this pandemic, is that countries have a much more realistic understanding of China. I think we were rather illusory, thinking that the China of 2020 was just like the China of 2010, but richer. Actually, the nature of China has changed, and we need to understand that. And its behavior towards India, its behavior, its wolf warrior diplomacy, its aggressive use of its economic powers. There are some good aspects of Belt and Road, but we also need to understand that there are some exploitative aspects of it as well. And the weaker the countries, the greater the exploitation. But I was asked, will the pandemic affect relations between states? I think one of the very good things about the pandemic is it's made ordinary citizens focus again on the importance of government and importance of competent government. I think too many countries, my own country is susceptible to this, Marcus, it may be true in your country as well. We rather set aside the requirements for effective service delivery and focus more on ideological questions. In Britain, it was channeled through the Brexit question. In America, it gave rise to Trump. And different countries have had different experiences of this. One of the good things about the virus is competence in government has become a central requirement, a central expectation. And I think that's contributed, in some ways, the biggest effect, political effect of coronavirus is the defeat of Donald Trump. If it hadn't been for the virus, we might be looking ahead to a second Trump administration. And I think if you have competent government and responsible leaders in government, then that's more likely to lead to effective cooperation between states. And I think we're seeing more of that in perhaps the best leader of a major power of the last 12 months has been Angela Merkel in Germany. Understated, efficient, competent, and really effective in managing both the domestic situation and the international relations. Sadly, she's going next year. I think the big test, though, the other lesson from coronavirus, if I could leave on this point, is that we've had to recognize that there are no national solutions to global problems. If you have a global problem that gets out of hand, as the Chinese allowed this virus to do, if you have a global problem, it needs a global approach to resolve it. And the biggest demand for the next generation is climate change. And I think the biggest thing that we can benefit from in terms of cooperation between states will be to learn the lessons that we have to cooperate. We have to cooperate in good time and not allow the climate to get out of control over the next 10 or 20 years. And I think that should be the focus for cooperation between states. We have the COP26 climate conference here in Britain, in Glasgow, later in a year's time. And I think that will be a very important forcing event for all countries to come to recognize, but also make real commitments and adjustments to deal with the changes in the global climate. If that's the legacy of coronavirus, it will be a good legacy.
Fantastic. Now we have like a final, just a few seconds for concluding remarks. Maycor, would you like to say anything final? Is your concluding remarks?
Thank you for giving me the last word. Really, I want to say, to echo what John just said about government being central and the return of government being important, or an important byproduct of this crisis, because again, as an African, I think this could be the best present that, every cloud has a silver lining, really. And for us in Africa, I think if we focus on building efficient and competent government, then we'll be halfway there to achieving most of the targets that we have for 2035.
Fantastic. Ambassador Neelam, would you like to say anything else, just to say your final word? You have to unmute.
You're on mute, Neelam.
You need to unmute, Ambassador. Oh.
Oh, sorry. Okay. No, I just want to say that I've already expressed the unease that we feel in India and in this part of Asia vis-a-vis the attitude and the postures that China is striking at the moment. But I do agree that the importance of government and the importance of trust in government and in science, as they say in America these days, is being restored. And that's a good thing. I think then we have something to work on. Thank you.
John, now you have the last word. Your concluding remarks.
I think one thing which we are seeing also with the end of the Trump era is a return to values in our approach to international policy. That issues like trust, as Neelam says, as reliability, as and respect for the rights of individuals is going to come back center stage. And I think when we talk about Asia century, those values are really important, and upholding those values amongst democratic countries like India, like Japan, like Southeast Asia, is going to be really important. And I think one thing we will see is the brutal Chinese suppression of the Uyghurs, for example, or the trampling of the rights of people in Hong Kong. I think there's going to be more of a reaction against that. China will not just be seen as an economic power, but some of the political actions of China will be challenged. And we can't, on questions of values, you can't be non-aligned. You can't be neutral. You have to stand up for the things you believe in. And for example, if there's a choice between India and China, I think most democratic countries would choose India because there's a democracy and rule of law there. And I think that is something which has been brought out and accelerated that understanding as a result of COVID.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. On behalf of the Policy Center for the New South and for the Atlantic Dialogues, I wanted to thank you for your wonderful participation in the panel. I'd like to thank Ambassador Neelam, who is the founder and director of Gateway House Indian Council on Global Relations, John Sowers, who is the executive chairman of Newbridge Advisory, and former chief of Her Majesty's Secret Service, Intelligence Service, MI6, and I forgot to ask about Champagne. I need to also thank Maycor Starr, who is the senior manager in government public sector practice at Deloitte, and also an Atlantic Dialogues Emerging Leader from 2015. But he's an emerging leader, and I'm glad to count on him. And also Amre Moussa, who left a little earlier because he had prior commitments, who was the former Secretary General of the Arab League and former Minister of Foreign Affairs of Egypt. Thank you very much, and I look forward to seeing you next year, hopefully in Marrakesh. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Marcus.
Have a good day.
Thank you very much.